Hey everybody, it's Christina of CraftyPaws. I'm here to share with you a special birthday card for a friend who loves dogs as much as I do. I'm using a Rubbernecker's Dogs Front and Back stamp set, and I just love that they covered so many different breeds. I'm going to show you guys the whole coloring process with Copic markers. And if you want to know the specific colors for each breed of dog, I've linked all of that in the description box below on my blog post. So this first dog I'm coloring up is a husky, and I decided to give it kind of like the traditional dark gray, black, white markings that the huskies have. You know, they have a little bit of a pitch point in their face. Their faces are white. Sometimes the tips of their tails are white. And then the bodies are mostly kind of that rich gray. And I decided to give it a cool gray. That's the C family of Copic markers, because I have that sense that the huskies are cold weather dogs and I like that cool gray crisp look. I've added a C7 here as well, you can see, because I wanted to get an even darker, richer color to his fur. And you'll see that the fronts of the dogs stamped out start from the left. That's how I'm going to approach it. And then the backs, obviously, because you want to be able to fussy cut everything out and put them together, the leftmost dog is on the front is the rightmost dog from the back, if that makes sense. So I'm going to color up each of the dogs' faces and the backs as I go along. So here I'm just adding a little bit of a lighter gray, not that super dark one, but this I think is a C3 or 5. And I'm just bridging the white and the dark parts of the fur, the markings, with that C00. The ears I've done in an R30 and the little tongue with an R24. Next, I'm moving on to all the little tongues. I just thought I'd get that out of the way with that R24 and the inside ears with that R30. And then I'm moving on all the way over to the right. I decided this one I'm going to color up like a German Shepherd. So it's got brown tones and black tones. I could have stayed a little bit lighter in the brown tone areas. You see, I started with an E33, and I probably could have gone even lighter in some of the brown tone areas, maybe with an E51 or a 53. I thought the 33 would be light enough, but I find that with these super small images that it's coming across darker, maybe just because the surface area is smaller. But you can see here I'm getting in the dark markings for that German Shepherd. I'm toiling with how do I color up the belly, but I think I'm just going to go with a lighter brown. The face details kind of disappear when the ink is really wet, like right now, but when you're finished, you can still see the details of the eyes and the nose and whatnot of the face, even when you're coloring with a darker C5 or C7. Now, the tips of the ears, the backs, the haunches, the sides of the belly, I'm starting to try to keep that brown a little bit visible just on the edges. And when I was coloring up all of these dogs, by the way, I Googled each breed once I decided what breed I was going to use to be the model for each dog, just so I could get the differences in the markings for each dog. I'm no dog expert, but as you all know, I love dogs, and I wanted to try to be as true as possible to how these dogs each look. I started to try and go a little bit lighter with an E21 there. You can see and 21 is a good light brown with a peachy undertone. But like I said, I could have gone even lighter with an E51 or even an E50, I think. That's almost a fleshy tone for like Caucasian people. But you can see there I'm moving on to the Pomeranian, which is a breed that I had as a young kid. This was my first dog breed that wasn't a family dog. It was my dog. And I got my Pomeranian probably when I was in like the second grade. I love that dog. wasn't trained perfectly, but it was trained pretty well. And it really taught me responsibility. And I'm keeping this dog really simple, just an E11 and E13. Again, I could have had more white or cream colored areas around the face like my Pomeranian did. But I wanted to just keep this simple because there are so many dogs to color in at this point. So I kept it just with the E11 and E13 and tried to keep the edges of the fluffy puppy with a lighter tone. The next dog I'm coloring up, I've decided this one is going to be like a golden retriever. So the whiter areas I'm coloring in with a W0, then moving on to an E51 and then an E53 for more of a golden yellow look. And I'm trying to keep the flick marks of the marker. They're blending pretty fast because these markers I've gotten them refilled, or I refilled them, so they're pretty juicy, so they're blending really quickly. But with dog fur, I think it's nice if you can kind of retain the flick marks or the texture of the fur. The edges of the tail, I colored in with that W0, and then I'm putting down the base layer of the E51, getting in a little bit darker with an E53, the base of the body, so that you can feel kind of the weight and where the dog comes in, where the middle section meets the haunches and where the head meets the torso. Those areas I think would be more valley-ish and a little bit darker in the coloring. The next dog I've decided is a Havanese, like my Bandito, and I'm coloring him up just like my Bandito is, with little brown patches on the back, on the ears, on the sides of the head. This back of this dog looks exactly like my Bandito. The front, the face, I usually keep his ears a little bit shorter, but I've decided, oh, this is just Bandito when he needs to be groomed. And I'm coloring up the eye patches, the ear patches with that brown. I think off camera, I might add another brown, but if I did, that color will be listed in my blog post. The next dog I decided is going to be a Schnauzer or an Airedale Terrier. And I'm coloring up this puppy with mostly browns, like a rich tone, that E97, E11, and then the darker areas I'm coloring in with a W5 and a W7. And you can see the real difference here in life. And the video, it might be harder to tell, but when you use warm grays versus the cool grays that I used on the Husky, this dog reads much warmer in color tones, just with that slight difference in the grays that I've used. And again, kind of like the German Shepherd, I'm keeping the edges of the back kind of in the brown tones, and then the middle down the spine area with the gray tones. And the front, this guy has more browns. The legs are more brown than the German Shepherd is. And so it's just got kind of hints of the black from the front. And I'm going back in and making sure everything looks really rich and saturated in color. Then next, I'm going to be working on the Bulldog, and I'm marking in where the white areas are with the W0, and then little bits of pink. I'm using an R20 because a lot of Bulldogs have kind of pinky patches around the face. And then I've decided I'm going to go with a lighter shade of browns for this Bulldog. I'm putting down the base of an E31, and then I actually skip over the E25 and go with the W0 for the white areas, the E35, and the E31 for the brown areas. And I'm leaving more of this front of the Bulldog white, like a lot of Bulldogs have. And then the top of his head, I'm leaving a little patch of white, but most of the body I'm coloring up with this brown, the pale brown, the E31, and then the edges where the wrinkles are, kind of the valley areas of the body with that E35. And then I'm doing a tip-to-tip coloring technique where I touch the lighter marker to the darker marker tip. And so it absorb some of the darker ink, and then I'm able to put it down. So it bridges this gap between E31 and E35. So there's a smoother color blend. And I love using that technique. It's great when you don't have a lot of markers, to be able to blend colors with a bigger range between them. I used a little bit of W5 around the muzzle mouth area to show the darker areas of the mouth of the bulldog. This next dog I'm keeping pretty simple. I'm coloring it up like a Dalmatian with W0 for the white areas, just where the shadows I think would be, by the neck, by the bottom. And then I'm just coloring up a bunch of little spots with a W7. And I notice a lot of Dalmatians have more of a white face. Their ears and bodies are more spotted. So I'm doing that, and I'm leaving more of the head area with fewer spots, which I think also works with the way this Dalmatian is drawn with little dot eyes. I didn't want the face to kind of disappear with all the spots. And I'm adding just a little bit of R30 there for the belly, just to show a little bit of the pinkiness of the flesh. The next little dog is a miniature poodle, like my sweet biscuit was, and my friend also has two poodles. One's a apricot and one's a red, so I'm coloring this up, and I'm kind of coloring it up with squigglies to indicate the curly fur of the miniature poodle, and the base is an E51. Then I'm adding some tones, some darker tones with an E21, and then the darkest with an E11. And I think the end result gets the texture down and also adds a little bit of the shadowing where the top knot and the ears meet the face. There are little shadowed areas where the belly is kind of a cast shadow being underneath the puppy sitting. And I think that that is a really simple way to color up a poodle with just squigglies rather than flicks. And I decided to add a little yellow to this golden retriever because it was reading a little bit too tan for me. I like the yellower color of goldens. So I went back in with this Y21. And that's the thing with dogs, you know, they're all different. So there's no real mistakes. You can keep layering on color. The only mistake I think you can kind of run across is if you color something too dark. You can't remove color so easily, although you could a little bit with a colorless blender. This next dog I'm coloring up like a lab, like a yellow lab. So I've put in the white areas with a W0 and then an E50 and an E51 to give that hint of yellow. And you can see how this reads paler. This yellow lab reads paler than the golden retriever, which was my intent. I wanted all the dogs to have their own unique coloring and for it to come across in this pack of dogs. I don't know if I mentioned that this is for a birthday card for my friend who loves dogs and, you know, all kinds of dogs. Of course, she has her favorites, but, and I love the fact that, you know, you can color up all these dogs any way you want. This, I've decided to color up this little puppy, this last one, as a Norwich Terrier. So it's got the same kind of browns and chocolatey colors. That E44 is, I think, called clay. And it brings a nice depth to the browns. So this little dog I'm coloring up kind of like Toto from The Wizard of Oz. That's a Norwich Terrier, I think, or maybe it was a Norfolk. I can't remember. The Norfolks have the down ears and the Norwiches have the pricked ears. But I think this came across really well and kind of bridges the darker German Shepherd with the yellow lab next to it. I end up cutting up these dogs apart because they don't fit across the windowed opening of the card design that I end up using. But I think this like pack of dogs is just phenomenal. I love this image. I'm adding a little bit of E13 just to bring a little bit more caramel color to this dog. It was reading a little bit too contrasty for my liking. And then, of course, I ink all the edges with a Memento Tuxedo Black ink marker. And then I'm using some pattern papers from a couple of paper stacks that I've had for a really long time. One is the Sunny Side from Pebbles, and the other is Here and There from Studio Calico. And off camera, I actually inked the edges of the grassy area with a Tim Holtz Distress ink in Mowed Lawn. So I'm doing the window base with this die cut pattern green paper. I die cut the grassy hillside. That's in MFT die. And here you see me cutting apart some of the dogs so that they fit across the base and also leave a little bit of the hint of grass so you can see that that's what they're sitting on. So I cut this pack up into 3 dogs sitting over to the left, and the bottoms I had glued the front and backs together, but just the top so that I could separate the bottoms and add little dots of glue so they can stand up. That's their backs. So isn't that cute? And then I add these 5 dogs to the more toward the right, so you can see the tops of the grass there. And there are like 2 little packs of dogs, front and back. And then for the top, I use this banner pattern paper, and these are the other dies that I used. I used little pennants from a Lawn Fawn die set, and you can see those are the 3 spare dogs that I had, so they're in the inside liner of the card. Then I made that pennant that says "Have a Pawsome Day," and those were individually die cut and then glued together, as you can see there in the back of the front of the card, the back side. And that's the completed card. I hope you've enjoyed this coloring process video. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, and thanks so much for joining me today. Have a wonderful crafty day.